Hey everybody, it's Chris and Rick Talk Guitars. Today we're going to talk about solo guitar playing, right, Chris?
Soloing, guitar
Yeah.
playing, solo,
So, isn't that
solos.
what I said?
I don't know.
Soloing? Okay. Yeah, let's start off by like talking about how you approach leads, solos in your playing, and I'll do the same. And then we'll segue into, maybe players we like, solos we like. But start off like how do you approach lead guitar when you're playing?
It depends on the song. If it's just a straight up like rock and roll song, I'll kind of like just go where I'm feeling it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
totally different than a song that you might be looking for a more melodic kind of theme based, solo part. And if I'm doing one of those, take a while. I spend a while with a song and figure it out. But it just depends, if it's a straight ahead like kind of calls for kind of a Chuck Berry kind of riffage thing, I'll start there and just play my little bag of cliches or whatever I'm kind of feeling. And then maybe go back and adjust some things to maybe put a little interesting spin here or there. But
Yeah.
it just depends on the song, really. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I take the same approach, but overall, I think even if I'm doing something simple or rock and roll, I I always like to think in terms of melody and playing to the chords underneath. You know what I mean? Because I mean, I'm
Uh-huh.
thinking of even like even something as basic as Chuck Berry. I think that's what he did. He was very mindful of, or maybe it was just like innate to him to play, you know, to play to the melody of the song, right? It's like there's a melody for the chorus and the verse.
Hmm.
And so I think even if I'm taking a simple approach, yeah, I try to think in terms of melody and the chord structure but beneath what I'm playing. Um, but that said, exactly. I mean, there are some fucking rock guitar solos that are just noise, but I love it because it fits the song, right? I can't think of something right off the bat, but or just something simple like maybe the Ramones, like the lead in "I Want to Be Sedated," which is just basically that droning, on the high E kind of, but it's so cool, right? Because even that's
Right.
melodic, because what he's playing is fitting the chord progression that's going on underneath that thing, but it's basically just droning on the playing the E on the fifth fret of the B string and the drone of the high E. But yeah, but I always that's what I'm drawn to. I just love melodic solos, melodic leads, whatever they are, whether they're simplistic or complicated.
Uh-huh.
That's how I approach it.
No, I think that's key is just whatever the song calls for. And just a lot of times I'm stuck. Like I'm trying to come up with a solo for a song and I'm stuck. And I'm like, I'm not really thinking anything. I'm not feeling anything. You go back and you listen to the vocals on like if you're soloing over verse, you listen to the verse vocals and then you play that on guitar, you find out where it is on guitar, and then you use that to build something. So you might want to do the exact same melody as a verse, but at least it gets you into the ballpark of coming up with something. Because sometimes, and this is like an old bluegrass thing where it's like the solo is the vocal melody,
Right.
right? And sometimes if you have like three verses in a song, you don't need another, copy of the melody on guitar. So, but there's there might be little key phrases in the melody that you can kind of use as a base and come up with something there to kind of just expand on it. But what it's good for is just if you ever get stuck. It's like I don't have
Yep.
any ideas. I'm playing all my same old lame shit. I can't think of anything. Go back to the melody and learn it on the guitar. And then from there, something will probably reveal itself, or that's what usually happens for me. And if it's kind of a blues based thing, there's kind of like that standard blues based riffing, 1 4 5, and places to go to make it sound like the classic blues thing. I don't really know that stuff very well. I mean, I can do like fake blues jamming, which I don't really, which I don't really like to do if I don't have to, just
Yeah.
because it's been done so much and it's just so obvious. But
Yeah.
there's that said, there's things in there that you can grab. You're like, what is the biggest blues cliche I could play right now? And then you turn it on its ear. You just come up with something like this is what the cliche to this part would be like. But if I do this, and even if it's just adding like a couple notes from, just outside of the blues scale, you know what I mean? To just kind
Yeah.
of give it a little different voice. I've done that before and that's worked pretty well.
I dig that, man. I dig that approach. If you're stuck, exactly, because that's what I try to do a lot. And like when you and I went down the bluegrass rabbit hole, it was so apparent. And it's just that's a fundamental part of bluegrass too, is that the instruments will just replicate, if not the melody verbatim, a twist on the melody during the instrumental parts. So I think that's an awesome way to do it too, because that's what I do too. And a lot of the songs that I like, frankly, where there's that interlude, it's basically just a guitar or some other instrument kind of riffing on the basic melodic theme of the song, which I dig. But it's funny that you said, talked about when you get stuck. Like, I've been going down the Joe Pass rabbit hole, that jazz guitar player, Joe Pass. He's fucking amazing. But he's being interviewed, and the guy's like, well, what are your influences and stuff? And he's a guitar player, but he was really influenced by horn players a lot. And he said he really didn't listen to like Charlie Christian or other guitar players, but he listened to like Charlie Parker and horn players. And his playing, if you listen to his playing, it's very much influenced by horns. And that's what I try to do too, is I try to listen to other instruments and get kind of the way they play, like even a piano, right? Like how a piano player like slurs notes and stuff, and try to translate that to the guitar. And that's kind of inspirational too, is to say, shit, because you and I both, we love lots of guitar players, but listening to other instruments and other players play and trying to translate that onto guitar is kind of cool too, if you get stuck.
No, that's exactly. I mean, I've done harmonica parts before too, which is, I was actually really satisfied with. There was like, I was playing a song that was already had been recorded. It was on record. And I was, the new guitar player in the band. And it's like, all right, here's this song. And live, they didn't have harmonica, so they just kind of didn't do the harmonica part. Uh-huh. So my approach was to play the harmonica part on guitar.
That's cool.
And that brings me to another thing, is a lot of times the way I like to play in a song is I'm not really playing straight rhythm break, straight lead. It's kind of like a lot of the guitar parts I come up with will have like little, single note melodies or, double stops or whatever in them. So it's kind of like a hybrid rhythm lead part to begin with. And sometimes there might be something that I came up with throughout somewhere in the song, like either intro or somewhere else, where there's like a little signature part, like a signature melody that maybe not is part of the vocal melody or anything like that, but it's just something that I came up with. And I will reintroduce that in like the solo or the middle 8 part, is like, here's this, cool. I'm going to expand upon this little like signature riff that I came up with as an intro, and then take it from there.
I like what you're talking about, starting maybe with something kind of that's known, like a known quantity, and then trying to turn it on its ear. That's another good inspiration too. I try to do that too. Because we both have our bag of tricks that we follow, that everybody does. But exactly, that's what I try to do too. It's like, okay, fuck, man, I'm playing this pentatonic scale. What note can I add, or can I bend a different note than I usually bend? But again, like, I've been watching these Joe Pass videos, and just that, even if you don't play jazz, like just watching the way he plays the instrument is inspirational, and you might be able to pick up some stuff about like how he approaches his playing, like phrasing and everything else. Like, the guy was just phenomenal, man. But anyway, so yeah. And also, yeah, I've been watching Oscar Peterson too, the great jazz piano player. And that guy is freaking amazing. And as a guitar player, I watch him play the keys and go, okay, well, see, that's how he slurs those things. Let me try to do that on the guitar. And it's kind of fun and kind of inspiring. So yeah.
You mentioned scales, which is kind of interesting, because my approach to scales has always been, I kind of know what they are. Like, I know the major and minor pentatonic, but I don't use them as scales. Yeah. I just use them as placeholders to know where I am on the neck. And It's like, I guess, subconsciously I know I'm playing in the scale, but I don't run the scales or anything like that. I just use them kind of as placeholders, and I'll just totally go by my ear and like a melody that I want to hear. So maybe I am like kind of based in the minor pentatonic or something like that while I'm playing, but I'm looking for notes. I don't care where they come from. You know what I mean? It's like, I can hear like a couple of little Middle Eastern like kind of flavors just on this part of it. So I like to do, one of the things, if we talk about guitar players that is not really my thing, is there's certain guitar players that sound like they're playing scales. And I always, maybe it's just because I'm lazy and never really learned scales inside and out, but I always try to avoid that, to just sound like you're practicing scales when you're playing, up the scale, down the scale, or whatever. But I think for me, I've always used scales, and I can't name, other than the pentatonic, I probably can't name them, but I can, but I I know that I'm in them when I
Yeah.
just, which sounds stupid. It's like but I just look for notes. You know what I mean? I know if I want something to sound dark, where to play for this, whatever key I am or whatever chord I'm over. And if I want something to sound happy, I know where to do that. But the classic scale shapes that you see if you look at like tablature, I just use those for placeholders to know where I am and where to start or where to be to get kind of a flavor. If that makes any sense. It's just I am kind of like scale illiterate.
I think the way you approach it is the right way to approach it, because ultimately we're trying to play music, right? And music isn't just scales. It's a melody that you create from the notes in a scale, right? And so I think scales can be beneficial for practicing and stuff like that. But exactly like you're saying, I think when you're trying to play music or write music, the scale is only a rough reference guide. Like you're saying, if it's a minor scale, okay, that maybe I can lend that to a sad, if it's a sad song, or if it's a happy song, it's probably going to be in a major scale or whatever, or notes from that scale. But exactly, I think you're on the right track, thinking about them only as a tool to kind of reference where you are and what kind of emotion you're trying to elicit in your playing, right? Because that's ultimately what we're doing. Because scales aren't going to move anybody, right? If they're going to be moved by the way you created a melody from those notes, man, and how you're playing those notes. And so, yeah, I think you're looking at it the right way. That's the way I look at it too. It's like I look at notes, and even that guy you and I were looking at, Tom Bukovac, he did a short rant on that too. It's like, because people are asking him, like, what positions do you use and what scales do you use? And he said, I just go by my ear and what sounds right to me, right? Essentially. And that's what serves the song, so.
Yeah. I mean, but don't get me wrong. I think somebody that with a really great knowledge of like musical theory, I mean, there's things that I would be envious of. They know immediately that if you're playing this chord progression and you use these little things right here, you can be like musically correct. And even to know that, just to be able to break that would be, I mean, it would be power. But I mean, I'm an old dog right now. It seems to be working for me. And it's really only been maybe the last 10 years or so where I've really started to focus on playing outside of, solo used to be like, I come up with a solo. This just sounds cool over this part. But now, and especially since I started playing with the band, the Riff Brokers, I have an opportunity to play over a lot more chords and a lot more interesting chords than, all my Stones-based rock bands, which I loved, but it was a lot more straightforward. This gives me interesting bridges and, every Beatle chord in the book. So it's a challenge, but it also taught me a lot about like what's going on chords and chords that aren't just your major minor chords and what makes those chords sound like they do. Yep. And from there, you can find little things to make it, when they go through those chords and you hit that funny chord, you're right there with them, and you're adding to it, which is super cool. But yeah, the whole scale, like practicing, I mean, a big put down on the internet that you'll see on a lot of forums is like, oh, I bet you only play the pentatonic scale. Right. I'm like, wow. But I mean, it's just a bunch of notes. So I mean, you could take those notes and you could make something cool, or you could make something stupid. You could know every scale in the book, and not play anything worthwhile. So I think that dude that you mentioned, I think his approach is kind of, I agree with. I mean, it's never hurts to have knowledge of anything. I mean, you're not going to hurt yourself by knowing that, but just knowing that in the end, it is about notes. And one thing that I always like to say is, take somebody like Mike Campbell he plays in a band with Tom Petty, who writes some of the most hooky, brilliant pop songs and rock songs ever. Yeah. And you can come away from a Tom Petty song humming the guitar parts. Yep. Because he's got it. He knows how to do that, like just that hook to hook you and make a part that's integral to the song. It's every bit as important as the lyrics. And that's always what I strive for. And in as many songs as I can. So
exactly, and that's the thing about scales. I'm not putting scales down or saying scales are. And I agree with you totally. I mean, the more knowledge you can acquire as a guitar player or a musician, the better. And I'm like you. I mean, I I started out learning by ear, and I've taken lessons over the years and tried to get into theory. It's never stuck with me. It's something it's always in the back of my mind that I'd like to learn more about, especially for chords and stuff. But like, I guess I'm just thinking in terms of like you and I were talking about guitar players that write songs that just sound like, scales essentially, rather than, or some guitar lead that's basically just sounds like a dude doing a scale really fast. I mean, that's cool, but I much more prefer, like you're talking about, like a Mike Campbell lead that just is a phrase or a series of notes that moves me right in a way. And so that's what I'm drawn to, and that's what kind of gets me jazzed, or guitar parts or musical parts like that too. So this is a good segue. You mentioned Mike Campbell. He's obviously, you and I both love him as a guitar player, and a person that comes up with, memorable guitar parts, guitar leads. Who are some other players that you really dig, that you feel really fit that bill?
Oh, off the top of my head, I mean, I'm the type of person that if I put a record on and I'm listening to something, the guitar player on the record is usually my favorite guitarist in the world at the time, because I mean, a lot of the music I listen to, I obviously love and I'm very familiar with. So, yep. I mean, I have a stack of records over here I'm looking at, and I could name a billion of them.
But even guys like I've never been a big Clapton fan, but one of the songs that keeps popping into my head as we're talking about this stuff is The Way You Look Tonight, or but
oh yeah.
That guitar part is iconic, right? Like, or I'm thinking about the intro to My Girl, right? I forget the guitar player's name, but God, he was one of the Motown musicians. And it's just that simple boom, 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 boom.
Those things where you slap your forehead and go, "Why didn't I think of this?"
Exactly. And it's so simple, but it is melodic. It's memorable. So like for me, I was raised on like, AM radio, rock and roll. And so I think that was just ingrained in me, like all of those, like, all of these, hit songs that had these hooks that just got me right away. So yeah, I'm really drawn to that. And yeah, like you say, Mike Campbell to me, I guess in rock and roll is one of the, top guitar players that just creates tasty, memorable guitar lines. That's what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to melodic players who come up with thoughtful guitar parts that just serve the song. I guess that's the bottom line, is just serve the song,
I got a question for you. So when you first started out playing guitar, first off, there's the classic struggle. It's like, what the hell do I do with this thing? You know, and you start off and you put chords together. Do you remember when you actually started like playing like lead guitars? Because I think as a guitar player, there's a bit of a rush to get there, because that's where all the glory seems to be. Do you remember how you finally worked out some sort of way to be able to play leads and what it was?
I don't remember a specific thing, but I do remember having the hardest thing for me to do was vibrato, just, getting that string to move and my hand to do that. It was the hardest thing. But once I got it, it's like, that's what you do. But it's funny. Like one of the first songs I learned was single note playing, which was Iron Man. That's, I think it's a big one for everybody.
Smoke on the water, yeah.
Smoke on the water, yeah. So it's, I guess, essentially, from the get-go, I was trying to play single note phrases on the guitar, so that sticks out in my mind. Like Iron Man, that melody was in my head, and I'm like, okay, let's try to figure this out on this guitar, So how about you? Do you remember a transition period where you kind of went from like learning chords or something and then going, okay, well, I'm going to do this lead, or it just happening, or?
Yeah, it just happened. It was so weird because I had just gotten like my second electric guitar, which was actually very playable. It was the first guitar that I had that was super playable, and something just clicked, and I got that like that pentatonic blues box scale, but just on the A, just in the key of A for some reason. So I learned how to do like these little pull-offs and trills and all this stuff. So it was like, it sounded like, I mean, I really impressed myself when I started doing it, because it seemed pretty easy. And I could play over, any song in A, I could noodle. And I was just like, yes, I've arrived. I'm a guitar player. So we were doing things like a jam with kids and like Riding the Storm Out, or, just about any Ted Nugent's record. I could start putting this stuff and making like solo sounds over top of like people playing chords. And that was just like a big, like, yes, I was so psyched.
That's so cool, though. That's cool. I mean, just the way you described that, I think that's so cool because, I mean, I do remember little moments of plateauing and then thinking, fuck, and then breaking through, right? Like, oh, cool. Okay, now I can play that F chord now, or that C chord or whatever. Or now I can do these, a little bit of lead work over this chord progression. Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. What else you got on solo guitar? Any other words of wisdom you can impart to listeners and me?
What about tone?
Yeah, tone is huge, man. Talk about what tone means to you in the context of solos.
Oh, I don't know. It's just, again, it's all over the map. I don't think I mean, my ears will prick up if I hear something like, oh, that works, but there's not like one consistent thing, that I gravitate towards. It's just depends on what I'm listening to. We mentioned in some episode long ago how quote shitty some of the guitar tones were of the 60s and 70s.
Oh, right.
But those are awesome. There's like warts, and it's like it's raw, and it's like no one would actively try to get that sound in a studio. I would think everything's so like perfect amount of overdrive and all this other stuff. And some of those old guitar tones were just awesome. They were just weird and fucking ragged, and in 70s rock is kind of what I'm talking about. But so it just depends. It just depends on the song. There's so many different kind of tones that I like in the context of whatever music I'm listening to. So I don't think there's one. I mean, because I like sustainy, fat, but I also like thin, like razor sharp, just depending on what it is.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's cool that you mentioned that too, because the characteristics of some of those weird tones are what make that a signature little phrase or solo. And exactly, I don't think anybody would go back and change that. Because what they captured is just, that lightning in a bottle. It's like, wow. Or even if it's slightly out of tune, it's like, well, it doesn't matter because whatever they did, it's the right thing,
Right.
And it's cool. Yeah. I love that.
So I say play out of tune. That's my new thing. That's going to be my tone.
So
my
basically our
tone.
recommendation is play out of tune, get an ice picky tone, and have fun. Right?
Exactly.
Cool. Well, dude, man, I loved chatting with you about guitar solos and stuff. And we'll have to, coming up, Chris and I are going to strap on some guitars and have a little guitar interplay too during some of these episodes because it's time. We play guitar, but we talk a lot about it, but we don't fucking play our guitar during these episodes. And that's bullshit.
Don't shut up about it.
Well, cool. Well, as always, thank you for listening out there, whoever you are, wherever you are. We appreciate you. We think it's so cool. Send us email, send us questions, interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Chris and Rick Talk Guitars. Check us out. Until next time, guys. Adios.
Goodbye.